Are two Jim Carreys better than one? Let's talk about Sonic 3.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Eye of the Storm podcast. Today, we'll be discussing Sonic the Hedgehog 3. But before we get into that, Daniel, do you want to give the people something to watch?
So the best thing I watched this week was The Borderlands, also known as Final Prayer, which is a found footage religious horror movie from 2013. The premise is essentially that the Vatican sends investigators to a small rural church in Devon where a miracle has been reported. And they are essentially sent to do the initial investigation of that claim. And the team are essentially this experienced investigator who has seen so many fake miracles that he has stopped believing in them. The vaguely religious tech guy who has never seen a miracle before and is easily impressed. And then you've got the church bureaucrat who believes in the teachings of the church, but thinks all of this miracle stuff gives the church a bad name. And those three are essentially sent to this small remote village to investigate these reports. It's kind of a found footage movie, but it doesn't make any good use of the found footage conceit. Like there's this whole thing about how the church wants no gaps in the reports, and so they have to wear these cameras at all times, but it doesn't make any sense. Like most found footage movies, it does not really justify why the movie looks the way it does and why people keep filming and so on. Also, the ending is not the greatest, but in between there's this really interesting atmospheric and at times creepy story about three people who approach something that's really going on, and it's not clear immediately what it is, but it might be a hoax, it might be a genuine miracle, it might be something else. They're waiting for gear to arrive, and they're waiting for the priest to show them to the church and stuff like that. So they have a lot of downtime in between their experiences, and so they talk about their faith a lot. This is like one of my pet peeves, where usually when movies approach this topic, it gets very stupid very quickly because it's just not very well thought out. It's full of cliches and platitudes and so on. And this movie, I thought, had interesting things to say about this, right? Where characters actually have interesting and coherent perspectives about this, and their reactions to experiencing something otherworldly, where it's not clear what it is exactly, at least initially, is interesting and believable. And the found footage conceit makes it very grounded, and it's like a very natural acting style and stuff like that all helps in making this feel like real people. And so it's just an enjoyable watch, and not scary exactly, like you're not gonna get any jump scares, but it's just people being in a creepy situation and kind of trying to deal with it in believable ways. And on that level, it's a well-made movie, and definitely worth a watch if you're into that subject matter.
Mm-hmm. I think where my ears perked up was when you mentioned about sort of the different characters and the different backgrounds that they had kind of going into this, sort of all sort of mixed into one, because I immediately know that, you know, if it has a good storyteller, then it has sort of those interesting kind of like character moments and interesting kind of like conflict in terms of sort of belief and sort of how they sort of approach various, you know, the various kind of like challenges and various sort of situations that they find themselves in. So definitely sounds super interesting in terms of sort of like that concept of it. Again, for anyone that's like super into like the religious side of things as well, I can imagine that there's like some interesting conversations sort of, or interesting kind of like I said, perspectives come out of it as well.
Yeah, it really hinges on those three characters approaching that topic and being in that line of work for very different reasons in very different ways. And that's kind of really the appeal to it. It gets often recommended as a cosmic horror movie, and I don't think it really is. It is a little bit, but I was going into that look based on those recommendations, and that's what I wanted, and I was a little bit disappointed. But what I found instead was actually one of the better religious horror movies I've seen. So I think expectations with this are really important, in the sense that if you expect the wrong thing from this, you'll probably have a bad time. But if what I've said sounds interesting, you'll probably enjoy this one.
My best thing recently watched was The Day of the Jackal, and for anyone that doesn't know it or anyone that hasn't heard of it, it's a recent sort of TV series that came out last month. It follows this elite sniper who's assassinated this sort of really high-profile sort of politician figure, and from here is then recruited onto sort of a bigger and sort of kind of like more riskier job from there, and then his kind of like counterpart is just like your typical kind of like tenacious sort of MI6 operative who's sort of all about sort of getting command and whatever like that. And what I do like actually is that they really pour into like the morally grey of sort of like kind of like both characters in terms of you're kind of like rooting. it's hard to. You're kind of like rooting for both in this, and they're both doing such kind of like callous and like almost like bad things, which kind of like stain their character and kind of sort of stain who they are. But at the same time, you're still kind of behind them. You're still sort of wanting to see them sort of do well. And I think this isn't too different to many other shows that are sort of about an elite assassin or elite kind of like killer that's sort of evading the law or whatever. But I think in terms of sort of like its premise, in terms of like him being a sniper and this that, and the other, they do a really good job of kind of like bringing you into that world and sort of kind of like setting up sort of kind of like the frameworks and like showing you the intricacies about sort of like his like planning and like his sort of kind of like methods and sort of how he goes about sort of kind of like doing things. I will say as well, it has like really, really good sort of twists and turns throughout it. And I think the final sort of episode definitely has some shocks, and it definitely makes very brave decisions that other shows maybe wouldn't have done, especially this early on in sort of season one. So great show, great protagonists, great sort of characters, great story in there, great insight, and yeah, can't say much more than that. A show definitely worth checking out.
So I watched the original from the 70s a couple of months ago. And one of the things, like I thought that was an interesting story that could have been told better. So I've kind of had this on my list. And but one of the things the 70s version does in an interesting way is how the Jekyll is constantly 2 steps ahead of the investigator. And a lot of that has to do with 70s technology. So getting a fake passport and being tracked at airports and stuff like that, or trying to cross borders without detection and stuff like that. And so like that whole thing is like a chase across Europe, essentially. And is that still part of that story, or did they kind of ditch that?
There's elements of it in there in terms of sort of like him being a lot more clever in terms of sort of how he's kind of like moving back and forth across countries. I think they definitely keep elements of that in the story. Maybe not to the extent that maybe you had it in the 70s, but it's definitely there, and it definitely does it well, and it definitely has the tension in the right places as well when it is doing that.
Because that doesn't really work in the same way anymore, right? Like with technology and surveillance and stuff like that. That they just changed the story, what it was about.
Well, I don't know how. I don't know.
Like the thing that drives the story in the original version is this cat and mouse game of evading detection and tracing the Jekyll steps and stuff like that, and disguises and like leaving a false trail and stuff like that. All of which is very rooted in 70s technology. And I guess rather than trying to update that, they just didn't. They just made it turn it into a different story.
Yeah, I think it's a slightly different story than that. So I don't think he's not really leaving sort of any clues or anything like that behind this. I think the driving force in this version of it is just like his kind of like determination and his like cunningness and his planning and stuff like that. And of course, he does like a few of like the disguises and stuff as well in this. He does a lot of disguises in this actually as well. But it's just more his meticulousness over sort of the whole like kind of cat and mouse thing. And obviously you've got the detective trying to catch him, so she is going to sort of like pick up on like clues and sort of pick up on certain things as well. But I don't think that side is as much rewarding as is sort of following the Jackal in his sort of process and his sort of kind of like what he's doing.
Okay.
Cool.
All right, moving on to the main attraction, which is Sonic 3. So briefly, Sonic 3, as the name suggests, is the third movie in the Sonic movies. So I don't really know the Sonic lore very well. So you're gonna have to fill in some blanks maybe. But like there are these alien hedgehogs who run fast, and Shadow was was the first one to come to Earth 50 years ago. Was captured by a government agency. Was put into hibernation for being dangerous. And at the start of the movie, he wakes up and starts wrecking stuff. And Sonic and team are recruited to catch him. That's the setup. So what did you think of Sonic 3 and how wrong is my synopsis?
It's pretty much what happened in the movie. What was my thoughts? I kind of came out of it thinking, it was okay. I kind of like got what I needed from it in terms of, wanting Shadow with a gun, kind of throw back to the PS2 game. For anyone that played it, you saw some cool sort of action scenes in terms of like kind of like Sonic and Shadow and sort of like some of the fight scenes and stuff like that in there. But overall, I was just a bit kind of like underwhelmed, mainly to do with the story and sort of the character development in this as well. I feel like there wasn't sort of much, especially it being the third movie as well. I feel like at this point you kind of have to know who Sonic is and know sort of where he needs to kind of like improve and where he needs to kind of like sort of find himself a little bit. And I don't feel like the movie had the perfect grasp of where he was and where they wanted to sort of like, kind of like position him by the end of the movie. There's a lot of jokes in this. Some of them landed, but I mean, I'll say very few landed, but a lot were quite childish. And again, it's a kids movie. I was in the cinema with a bunch of kids all around me, and they sort of seem to be having a good time. So maybe I wasn't 100% the target audience for that. I can appreciate that, but I don't know. A lot of it just didn't hit the way that I kind of like wanted it to. But I go back to story because I feel like, what a lot of the best kind of like animated or sort of kids movies do is that they underneath sort of some of the silliness, underneath some of the sort of kind of like goofy stuff is typically a kind of like a good story with sort of with good characters and a sense of purpose behind sort of what they're trying to tell in the story. And I feel like they attempted it, but it wasn't done that well in this movie. Pretty mixed on it. I don't think it was even like high on my like anticipated sort of movies of the year. It was just kind of like one that came up, and it was just like, okay, I saw the movie, and that's kind of how I sort of moving from there.
I had a good time with it on balance. I think it might be the most fun superhero movie I've seen in a while, with the exception of Deadpool 3. I think it does like the beats of a superhero story and stuff like that quite well. I've not played any of the games. I've not seen the previous two movies, but I had a basic idea of who the characters were and what they did and why they did it and things like that. I thought the action was fine. Like, speedsters are among my least favorite power set because they tend to not lead to interesting stories. And I thought that considered they did pretty well here. They used the speed decently. I wasn't wowed exactly, but it was like it moved fast. It also kind of knew kind of what it wanted to be, and it did that, right? So it's very fast paced. It wastes not like very little time. It just throws out rapid fire jokes, and if you don't like one, there'll be another one in 20 seconds, right? Like, the thing that left me walking out kind of unsatisfied at the end is I thought Sonic does not have really much of a personality here. And the way, like, the ultimately story comes down to him getting through to Shadow, right? Because Shadow is kind of like what would have happened to Sonic if he didn't have friends and family, right? So the story kind of hinges in the end on Sonic getting through to Shadow, and this movie just didn't really do anything to earn that, right? Like, ultimately, it comes down to let's be nice to each other, and then Shadow says, well, if you put it that way. That's kind of what it comes down to, and that's really unsatisfying, even for a children's movie. I think it being a children's movie doesn't excuse it from having a weak resolution or weak characters, and that's kind of what made it ultimately kind of disposable at the end. And it didn't have to be that, and they kind of set themselves up for like a very character-focused resolution, and then they just didn't do it. And I thought that was like the big sin this movie has. Let's talk about it.
I mean, spoiler section, where do you kind of want to start? Do you want to start something like more on the positive or something kind of like the negative? Because I know you mentioned obviously about the weak resolution.
Yeah. Let's talk about what this movie does right.
I feel like you had more positives coming out of it than I did. So
one question I would have is, if you are a Sonic fan, is this good? Is this satisfying?
I'm aware of Sonic. I've like kind of like played the games, watched some shows. I wouldn't say that I'm a fan of Sonic and that I need to kind of like check out everything that is Sonic, or sort of kind of like I'm super invested in his personality. But there were like many moments throughout this where it did give the nostalgic feel, especially like again when he's like going high speed and like when he turns into a ball and like kind of when he like hits like his like max speed and like turns into a ball again, like I mentioned about like Shadow and sort of like him and like just like actually to be fair, like his presence and his energy sort of kind of like off the bat gave off like the right vibes, gave off like the kind of like the cool hedgehog that you kind of got from the Shadow games, the one that has had like the gun, that the one that's like a little bit more like edgier and like different. I feel like the movie handled some of those aspects of it, really well. And even like Tails and Knuckles was more your typical kind of like dumb brute character that you have in sort of these type of movies, like similar to sort of Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy, who just kind of don't have the best grasp of sort of what they're saying at all. But in terms of like all the other characters, like Tails included, I think they gave the right feels and had like the right essence to sort of make you nostalgic for some of the games that you played before, some of the TV shows that you've seen previously. But I don't know. How did it come across for you? Someone that hasn't sort of had as much experience with some of the Sonic franchise.
So the thing I associate with Sonic games is going fast, running, a kind of like too cool for school attitude, right? Mm-hmm. And that is kind of what these movies delivered. And like, but as I was watching it, I was kind of having this question in my mind: is this like what diehard Sonic fans know and want from the franchise, or is this something that like people in general, like that's what's out there through cultural osmosis, right? These are like, it did all the things I'd heard about Sonic, but I wasn't sure to what extent it actually knew those characters, because it felt a lot like they just kind of I think one of the things an adaptation should do is kind of boil down the appeal of the thing you're adapting down to its essence, and then build that essence up in the context of your new medium. Like in this case, and then you take what people like about the games, and then you condense it down to its essence, and then you make a movie based on that, right? And it seems like this does that, right? Like it seems to give the kind of experience that you want from a Sonic movie, right? I guess that's why this is the third one, and this is why the others have been so successful, because it does that, right?
Yeah, no, agreed. Even like down to the character design, because I think you're probably somewhat aware of like the first design that they trudged out for Sonic, which got completely like bashed. So even like down to the character design and like sort of all of that, I think it gives even like some of the settings as well. So like even when they're having the race through sort of the woods, it just kind of like reminded me of like some of the backgrounds that you would see in sort of some of the games. So I think even on that level, they were getting it right on that front. But again, I'm not the biggest sort of Sonic fan. I'm not like the person that can kind of like reel off all the different sort of like Sonic facts or Sonic characters as well. I'm just kind of like somewhere in between. But I think the biggest contention that I had in this was more so like the story, and I feel like you were like maybe okay with the story, but you just didn't like how it ended. But for me, I'd say I was okay with it as well. I just didn't feel satisfied with it, and it eventually kind of like boiled down to being something that was like very generic and something that was just very much, I've seen this kind of like played out before, and I've seen it done in a better way, which is probably why I feel like more flat on the movie. It's just because it didn't do anything super impressive or super like different or try to like capture anything different. It just kind of went by the playbook and just pretty much did that. So I don't know, that's why I'm kind of like finding it difficult to have any enthusiasm like over this, or like even like why I'm finding it difficult to even have anything like super negative to even say about it, because it just felt like it was just kind of like run of the mill. It was just like generic. It just kind of like followed the formula and kind of did it in an okay-ish fashion.
Yeah, it seemed like the quality is there in terms of delivering the kind of experience that the audience wants, but then they're kind of missing the story that would make this something you would want to go back to at some point, right? Because I had, at least in the first hour or so, a pretty good time with it, in the sense of being entertained, and most of the jokes landed. And like one of the things about the humor in this is that they have no target audience, right? They just make any jokes that come, like that pop into the writers' heads, and so there's something for everybody, right? Which I guess works. It's just the entire thing with Shadow is just not, it's just not a scenario that really lends itself to a very interesting story, because there's like a couple of different weak points to it, right? The first really big one was, why did he not run away? Because when he gets thawed out, he immediately wipes the floor with like a dozen goons, right? And they have no countermeasure to him. They have no way of containing him, which leads me to question, how was he captured in the first place? And I don't think that's a nitpick. I think that's a really major part of the story, right? Because he could have just run away the entire time, right? And the one thing that kind of prevents him from having run away is Maria, right? So this like Robotnik's, what is it, granddaughter? Which I guess makes her the younger Robotnik's cousin, I guess, or sister, or I don't know.
One of the two.
Yeah. So, or aunt, I don't know. So anyway, but it's like the grandfather's daughter, right? So which whatever that makes her, that she was the only friend that Shadow ever had growing up in the lab, right? And like I think the thing that could have really saved it is if they had made it clear that he got caught because he slowed down to help her, right? And that is how he gets caught in the end. But before that, he could have run away at any point. So they kind of didn't justify it on that level. And then towards the end, he is kind of the dark mirror of Sonic, right? Like he basically comes from the same place as Sonic, but he's basically what would have happened to Sonic if Sonic hadn't had friends and family, right? Like if Sonic had been alone and abused by everybody and rejected by everybody, like that's kind of how he would have how he might have turned out, right? Sonic is tasked with bringing in Shadow, right? And so ultimately Sonic then has to get through to Shadow, and ultimately he does it by simply say, let's be nice, right? I didn't see like what, like how he actually got through to Shadow in that sense, and why Shadow changed his mind and ended up actually risking his life for like to save the world, right? A world that he previously had said, like, I don't care what happens to them.
Yeah, I think
the
only part of like the movie where I can feel like there was a slight turn in Shadow's character was when he hurt Tim, and then he saw sort of kind of Sonic's grief for him, or Sonic's kind of like emotion for him, and that partially reminded him of like his feelings towards sort of like towards Maria, but outside of that, and even saying that, it doesn't make sense, because what does that do? Does it, like, in his eyes, does that humanize Sonic in a sense? But like, does like everybody not have like someone that, you know, cares about them, or these like other like goons and whatever that he's like beating up or like hurting this and the other? I mean, he's about to like wipe out an entire planet. Like, there's, you know, does he not believe that there's like good people out there that have like people that care for them on the planet, or is he like so blinded by his rage? So like that part of it I kind of get, but again, it's not handled in the best care, because in other situations, I know people hate the whole like Batman versus Superman, the whole like Martha thing that sort of kind of goes on in there, but that in that scene, that's when kind of Batman recognizes that actually there is like this like human side of him. There is like this sort of like emotional sort of connection that he has like to the human world, because that's his mother, and like he can resonate to that because his like his mother's also called Martha. So in that scene, it works better than, you know, having one hedgehog look at another hedgehog care about a human, because what does that do? Does it humanize the hedgehog for him? I don't know. It's confusing.
I was reminded of that scene as well, right? Because it kind of, like you said, it humanizes Superman in the eyes of Batman, and it kind of gives them something to have in common, right? When they think they have nothing in common. And I think that scene is a little bit clumsy, but at least I can see where they were going for, right? And here I didn't really see that at all. Like, I don't know what changed for Shadow, right? Like, if the thing that changes for Shadow is that Sonic is the first person since Maria to care about him, or at least to stop for a second and try to help, I can buy that. Those are the only two who have ever done that for him, right? Like, even Robotnik just uses him, right? I think the thing that's really missing here is that kind of moment of realization, or where he's kind of conflicted, like where he's tempted to maybe to do the right thing, but he's not sure if he can trust Sonic, and so he has this internal debate, and then takes a chance, and it's rewarded, right? That's like something like that. I think that would be the beat that's really missing here. And then we've got a similar thing with Robotnik, where the bad guy becomes a hero, kind of because he thinks destroying the world is a step too far. And I kind of thought it was something along the lines of, you can't destroy the world, that's where I keep all of my stuff. But it didn't seem like that's been used in other villains before, right? Where they say, look, I wanna do evil for profit, and there's no profit in destroying the world, because then there's nothing left, right? Like that's been done before, and I thought they were kind of going there, but also not really, or at least not very explicitly. He just has like a moment of, no, I'm not gonna go along with this, I'm gonna stop you, and that's kind of it.
Pretty much, yeah. I don't think there's anything like super profound in there for him. I mean, as much as like, you know, people enjoy Jim Carrey, and like I'm a kind of big fan of like his earlier work. There wasn't really too much of a purpose of like having the younger Robotnik, so, you know, in this movie. They didn't really need him for anything really. Like, and they didn't have a good enough team up in this movie as well to kind of like justify the whole like, this is Sonic's biggest enemy that he's like hated for like ages, and then all of a sudden that they now have to put the differences aside to sort of work together. They didn't have a compelling enough kind of like story for that, and of course the direction that they went was this whole two Robotnik things, which I think in my younger days I probably would have enjoyed. Again, I'm like, I've enjoyed Jim Carrey and like, things like Ace Ventura, The Mask and stuff like that. But I think on my side anyways, that doesn't quite work for me anymore. Something like the over the top kind of slapstick childish comedy. It didn't completely work, but at the same time I kind of enjoyed watching Jim Carrey doing his thing as well, if that makes sense. Like I didn't enjoy what I was watching, but I enjoyed that he was having fun doing what he was doing.
Yeah, I don't normally like Jim Carrey, like his style of humor. I think I liked it when I was 12, but not after that. It's just tedious, annoying. It's too much. But kind of having two of him on screen and him playing off himself for some reason loops back to being amusing, because now he's kind of just egging himself on, kind of thing. And like that scene where they fight each other and they establish the no mustache rule and stuff like. It's funny, right? Like he gets to let loose for a couple of minutes, right? And like that's the kind of stuff I think that really works here, where they just put in a bunch of jokes and a lot of them work. And there's so many of them that only a small percentage of them needs to work for it to be worth your while, right? But ultimately, what I think allows for actual like investment and attachment is when the story works. And I think that's the part that's neglected here. And when I see like a parallel, like two Sonics and two Robotniks, right, who both are kind of in similar situations, where they're kind of reflections of each other who have taken different paths based on past experiences and stuff like that, and like they are faced with a choice, and in each case one of them makes the right choice and one of them makes the wrong choice. I'm kind of smelling a theme here, right? Like that's where that would go. I mean, and I'm not sure it does.
Yeah, I mean they mention choice a lot throughout the movie. From sort of Tom's discussion with Sonic to sort of Sonic's conversation with Shadow about like making the right choices, and like Shadow Sonic like saying about like trying to make the good choices. But I don't feel like it was fleshed out enough throughout this, and I don't feel like it weaved into the story well enough to kind of like give that satisfying feeling by the end to have sort of that whole conflict resolution between Sonic and Shadow, and where he's like kind of like explaining about like making the right choices and stuff like that. I don't feel like it was weaved well enough into the story to then feel satisfying once we got to that moment.
And like there's not much of a choice to make, right? It's not like there's a real dilemma for any of them, right? Like Sonic talks about having to make the right choices or good choices, but that's more like along the veins of he needs to grow up, right? Like he doesn't take things seriously, he doesn't take responsibility, and it's time he starts doing that. But that's not what the story is about, right?
I was the only person that actually made a brave choice was Knuckles, in fact, in terms of like telling him where the emerald was for him to power up. It was because he knew it was the wrong decision for him to use the emerald in a fit of like vengeance or rage or whatever. But he trusted Sonic enough, he trusted his friend enough that he'd eventually make the right choice. So he like in that situation had a choice of like, do I help him out and like have faith in like my friend to be able to not kind of like see that this isn't the path he wants to go down, or do I just like not tell him where it is or whatever like that and just like let him go in a little bit underpowered. So I feel like that was a moment where it was like a real kind of like profound choice to be made.
A little bit, but there's also no consequence to Sonic getting the power up, right? Like it seems like this should be something he earns by becoming responsible enough or mature enough or whatever, and that's when it becomes safe to do. But what's the guy's name? Is it Knuckles? It's just played for comedy, right? He's sworn this oath to defend kind of the emerald or whatever it is with his life, and now he has to defend it against his friend. And then Sonic wins, and he takes the emerald, and then he wins. Like there's no, it doesn't seem like there's consequences for that decision or any stakes or any downside or anything like that, right? It's just purely a speed bump or a formality.
I think what takes away from the choice is maybe knowing that there was always a happy ending, or like it wasn't going to end badly, because like the real choice would have been, again, if this was like maybe like a more mature story where it wasn't a kids movie, was Sonic could really use this power up for vengeance in the wrong way, and like maybe like kill Shadow and like completely change who he is as a character, and that's what Knuckles was maybe trying to protect him from.
But
But
that doesn't happen.
but yeah, and it doesn't happen, and two, it's a kids movie, so you know that that's never going to happen. I don't think
Yeah.
that was never going to be a case. So that kind of like takes away from the decision. It takes away from like the potential risk of giving him this power up.
Yeah, so we have this idea of making good choices, right? Like Sonic is told this multiple times. Knuckles has to make the choice of whether or not to uphold his oath, right, and prevent Sonic from getting the emerald. Robotnik makes the choice to turn, like, he wants family, but he turns against his only remaining family to do the right thing, to save the world. Shadow also has this thing about needing to make good choices, and he hasn't so far, and now he has to, like, but ultimately I don't think the story is really about any of that, right? Like, there's nothing, like, the resolution is not based on characters making the right choices. Characters don't change in a substantial way to where they initially make bad choices and in the end they make good choices or anything like that, right? So this seems like just complete window dressing to me.
Do you know what? I'll give it a slight pass because it attempted. Because I mean, we've discussed so many movies this year where it's not even like thought. I know you're gonna say it's not done well here, and we probably shouldn't give too much praise for this kind of like half-hearted attempt at doing so. But then like there's so many times in like movies that we reviewed this year where it's just non-existent at all. So I'll give it some blight for having the consistent theme in there, but it just wasn't tied together as sort of kind of like neatly as it probably should have been.
Yeah, and it's like, it's okay. So they mention that idea, but then they don't craft the story around it. And that's like, it's like you're right that some movies have tried even less, but that's not really.
It's not high praise for this movie, but
Yeah, and that kind of leads into this idea of, are we overthinking this? Are we not 35 years over the age of the target audience? Isn't this just fun and bright shiny lights and noise for the children? And I was in a very mixed crowd. Like, I think the youngest was like 7 and the oldest was like 50 or something like that. This is appealing to a whole bunch of people. And I don't know how many of them were there to write reviews about the movie. Like, that might be a case of it too. That kind of it skews older than you might think because people want to talk about it on the internet. That's entirely possible. But like, I would not have watched this on my own, right? Like, this is just not something, like, even if even this was like a Toy Story or something, or a good Pixar movie or something like that, right? I still wouldn't have gone because it's just not something I'm typically interested in. But I think the idea that this is just a kids movie, therefore we need to shut up and enjoy the ride, is misplaced, because I think a children's movie would need to be written differently and less, like, with less complexity and less subtlety than something aimed at adults. But you can still tell a good story, and just saying it's for children is not an excuse to tell a broken, like, this is not that broken. It's just not good enough, right? But like, I don't think that's an excuse. And in fact, isn't this like if there's, like, people always talk about messages and lessons and morals in movies, like, if any movie should have that, then it's something like Sonic that's aimed at 8-year-olds or 10-year-olds, right? Like, why aren't you telling a story about responsibility or about compassion or about second chances or something, right? Like, this is kind of leaning onto those subject matters, right? And why are we not teaching, like, 9-year-olds a story in which Sonic grows up and or Shadow kind of rethinks his cynicism or begins thinking about other people for the first time? Like you can't you do that? Like, is that too much to expect?
No, I don't. I don't think we're asking for too much there. I feel like, again, perfect target audience to be sort of teaching them those things, and teaching them, like, setting these examples, because, like, this is part of their learning. This is part of sort of where they're getting the development from. Obviously not just like the parents and friends and stuff like that. It's like what they consume and sort of how they see sort of like right from wrong, and how they see sort of how to treat other people and stuff like that. there's a lot to kind of like be picked up from these movies. So some of the best of the animated movies, your Pixar movies, etc., handle these themes really well. And again, it's like it's a nice mix of, things that will get the children sort of engaged and excited, but at the same time, it will have some type of like moral or some type of like purpose to sort of the story that they're trying to tell in this. And I feel like a lot of that's lacking, and a lot of it is hidden behind it's just a movie for kids, and we can just make it like dumb fun for them.
Yeah, and like I've said before that a movie aimed at adults should not have morals and should not teach lessons. It should present arguments or ideas. Because if you're an adult, you should, number one, probably shouldn't get your value system from a Sonic movie. And you probably have better sources or should have better sources than blockbuster action movies, right? But if it's aimed at children, then like that's where you put that, right? So the fact that it's like your target audience is like children just means you need to make the lesson simpler and more obvious, right? That's kind of the writing lesson there, I think. It may be that we missed something in the movie where maybe there's actually some subtle cue towards Shadow's state of mind or whatever, but if the audience is actually like 9-year-olds, then that's probably too subtle. Like if we missed it, then they missed it too. And I don't think that's an excuse in general. Like often people will excuse bad writing to say, yeah, but that 9-year-old over there liked it. Like, you want to fight that 9-year-old? Said no. Actually, I want that 9-year-old to get better movies. Like so a movie can be fun and have quality as well, right? And I don't think this is a bad movie exactly. It's more like you're already like putting together a scenario that lends itself to these kinds of topics, but then you shy away from something that actually makes sense, and it's purely just a cartoon, like in the worst sense of the word. So I'm a little bit puzzled. I don't know if the other movies are like this. Like I keep reading that this is the best one, or better at least than the second one, and that the characters in this are better fleshed out and have more going on than they had in the other movies and whatever. And that kind of makes me think I haven't missed much by skipping the other two movies. I don't know.
I mean, on reflection, actually, I actually think I enjoyed the first one a lot more. Again, it's the whole like fish out of water story where Sonic's just being introduced to this kind of like new world, and you kind of like seeing this sort of bright, energetic sort of kid sort of interacting with something that's completely foreign to him, and similar to what this movie was doing in terms of like learning sort of some of his responsibilities and sort of learning sort of how to manage his powers in this world. I feel like I was like more engaged in that movie than this one, even though there were like good moments in that, and to kind of move the conversation on, actually, I was going to say, to put yourself in your 9-year-old self, what were your favorite moments?
So I think all the action sequences worked really well. Like they really make good use of like one of the things in the first half hour, 45 minutes that really kind of impressed me is how quickly it moves onwards. Like I think this is not just about playing to a 9-year-old's attention span, but it's also just really efficient in terms of how it moves the plot forward and then like introduces characters, introduces places and stuff like that. So I think like on that level, I thought at least the first part of it was really well crafted. Actually, I think my favorite part was probably the fight between the two Robotniks, where you kind of can see that they're cut from the same cloth, but they are slightly different. And Robotnik is like having seen the other movies, I don't know how experienced Robotnik is supposed to be, but he was kind of up against somebody who knew all the same tricks but knew them better. And like that whole thing, I thought was really amusing to watch. Like I had a really good time with that.
Do you know what I really liked as well was just kind of like how wacky it was with like the kind of like technology. It was like very much out there, and it didn't really care. Like, it didn't care to be like grounded in any type of way. It was just like they were just pulling all types of tricks out of their bags. That part was like thoroughly entertaining on that sense. But for me, it was for sure the chase scene between Shadow and Sonic, in the sense of like they're kind of like both using their powers. Shadow's kind of like infusing his like kind of like chaos energy into the bike to like kind of like make it go at faster speed and stuff like that. And just the way that he was just kind of like manhandling everyone pretty much. And again, like I like a villain that has like presence. I like a villain that feels like a threat to the hero. And through large parts of the movie, it felt like Shadow was this immovable object that, needed like all of Sonic's strength to even like come close to even possibly like dealing with, and eventually he had to get the Infinity Stones, is what I call it, obviously like the Emerald, but what looked like the Infinity Stones at one point. And it was actually like quite interesting to actually see them both powered up as well towards the end of the movie as well. But yeah, no, definitely the chase scene was my highlight. And that's when I kind of like set up. I was like, okay, cool, let's start going somewhere with this movie.
I think throughout the movie there's a whole bunch of creativity and just fun moments. If you can get on board with the humor at all and with the style at all, then I think there's a lot to like. But I think if you're doing that, like, why don't you just put in like a very boilerplate story that works but is nothing special, and that then gives you the framework for the jokes, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, maybe I'm the only one who kind of sees it that way, but like that kind of removes kind of any kind of rewatchability from the movie, where like once you've heard the jokes, I'm not sure there's much else there.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I kind of feel like it's one of those movies is like once you've seen it, there isn't really a reason to kind of go back to it again. And I don't know how profound like the fight scenes are, or sort of how memorable they are to sort of make you even want to sort of kind of go back for that either. I feel like once you've kind of seen it, it's you're kind of done with it and you can move on to the next thing.
Yeah, you can make an animated, fun movie aimed at younger audiences and still have that emotional core that people care about, right? Like Toy Story is something you can rewatch over and over again. That is like an example of something that's shown staying power, right? And there are others too. And I think the ones that have staying power because they have this core to them. So I don't know if that's asking too much from this franchise, or if this is just like you eat your popcorn, you enjoy the ride, and then you get off the ride and you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't get much. Like that's unsatisfying to me.
It's kind of compared to the Mario movie. It does more than what the Mario movie does, at least in the sense of like it like the Sonic movies still give you the things that you want to see, the characters you want to see, the kind of like member berries and stuff like that. But at least it put it in some type of story. I don't know if you ever watched the Mario movie, but that was just one big nostalgia fest where it was just like remember this, remember that, remember this, remember that, and it kind of didn't lead anywhere at all. That movie, that one, you probably would have tore to shreds actually. So in that sense, I commend it for actually being somewhat proper movies based on sort of an IP, based on balancing the whole sort of having enough for sort of people to feel like nostalgic for, whilst actually like trying to tell a story and trying to sort of have something going on with the characters. Do you want to touch on what's come? Because they've clearly teased more.
Yeah, can you talk about that?
I was about to say I don't think I even have like, because when the characters came on, like my nephew got really excited, and I was like, who are these people? I was like, who's this? I know like Metal Sonic, I've seen like Metal Sonic, but I've not like experienced Metal Sonic enough in like any medium to like properly get excited for him. And Amy's just like another one that I kind of like recognize, but again, don't have like too much.
Yeah. And I don't know, is it enough for each movie to just introduce one or two characters that people know? Is that all there is to it?
I think so. It gets people like excited to kind of like build out this world and like dig deeper, because like it clearly like from the reaction that people had like around me, they were like very like happy to see. They were like, oh, finally they're doing this character, and it seems like people are enjoying these movies enough to want to see some of their sort of kind of like favorite side characters appear in some of these movies, it seems.
Yeah. Do the other movies kind of build a world? Like, is there like a play? Like, Sonic comes from another planet, right? Or another dimension?
Sonic comes from a different. So I've not seen the second one, so I can't assess the second one. So in the first one, it's very much just Sonic and it's focused on Sonic. And then the second one, I know introduces Tails and Knuckles as like additional characters, and I think Knuckles is actually the antagonist, who then sort of turns out to sort of join Team Sonic in the by the end of the second one. From the third one, anyways.
But does it ever build out the world? Like, do we know what kind of place this is? Have we ever been there?
No, I don't think so. Like it's very much a place where he's left and hasn't been able to go back to, and was like, I can't remember what the reason it was in the first movie, but he was very much by like the owl, the owl that they mentioned in the movie, like that he was kind of like nostalgic for. It was like she very much like sent him away to Earth because like he was in danger. I think they were in danger or whatever. So like he had to leave the planet that he came from.
Yeah, because the whole thing seems kind of anemic to me, right? Like,
Yeah.
if I wanted to get into the lore of Sonic, like these movies are not offering me much, right? Like, there's references to the planet he came from, but there's not much about it. The world has not really reacted to him existing very much. I don't know what Gunn is like. In the other movies, it sounds a bit like it's a twist here that they are the bad guys, but I don't know. I don't know if they'll go there in future movies, but so far it seems a little bit unsatisfying that he kind of just exists. Like there are these talking alien hedgehogs, and nobody seems to care. Like, it does not seem to have any kind of impact on anybody.
Mm-hmm.
They just live there with their kind of surrogate parents somewhere in the wilderness.
I mean, in the first movie, they established the relationship between like the parents and Sonic. By the second, again, I've not seen the second movie, and I feel like that's where a lot of like the missing context may potentially be, because of course, like Knuckles would have had to have come from. I don't think Knuckles came from this Earth. Knuckles must have had to have come from his planet, and I don't know whether they like delve into that a little bit more in the second movie. Yeah, so Knuckles comes from Mobius, where he was like raised and born in a tribe, basically.
Is that the same place that Sonic comes from, or somewhere else?
Knuckles comes from the place that we're feuding with the Owls, where Sonic comes from.
Okay.
To for the Master Emerald of Ultimate Power, and then the Owls hid it away somewhere. It's kind of like just a quick thing that like grabbed from Google.
I don't know. Like this movie could be an opportunity to kind of expand on that world a little bit, right? Like in ways that the games couldn't. Like I don't know when the last Sonic game came out. I'm not sure, but like these things were established like in the 90s, I guess, right? When those first games came out, and then other games have built on that. It seems like an opportunity to kind of expand like what that world is like, right?
I feel like by the third one, they've kind of like exhausted him being in the real world, and maybe they can like start to explore a little bit further. And like you said, kind of like I feel like it's like now would be the perfect time, because you know you have your Team Sonic, you have like established like all these different kind of like hedgehogs, and again you've got this like list of like a bunch of like side characters that are like from different places that you can then find some type of reason for Sonic to go and like explore and like go and exist in that place as well, or tell a movie in that.
Yeah. I don't know, but it doesn't seem like that's necessarily what the fan base wants, right? They seem to be mostly interested in seeing like more and more characters kind of come to Sonic, and then they have an adventure. And I guess the idea is always that they fight initially and then become friends. Is that kind of the formula?
I think so, yeah. So it seems like.
Okay. It's just, I'm definitely not the target audience of this, right? Like both know in terms of age and in terms of knowing the background of this. But it just seemed a little bit flimsy, right? Where there's just not that much going on. But I don't want to kind of drag down everybody else's fun, right? But I'm just saying, like, is like CGI hedgehogs running fast? Is that the entirety of the fun, or am I missing something?
I think that's the entirety of the fun.
Okay.
I mean, you see him feud with Robotnik in this a couple of times. Like you see him feud with Knuckles, you see him feud with Shadow. Like I feel like they're giving people just about enough to keep them like happy and satisfied. It seems, without like, and I'm sure there's like a whole like subgroup of like Sonic fans that are like, you know, probably confused and like hating sort of what the direction that they're going in, you know, with the franchise, and probably wanting them to do a little bit more of the law-based stuff. But I feel like they've kind of like found the formula in terms of like how to tell some type of like somewhat of an entertaining story without needing to sort of go into like complexities of it, and like without needing to sort of do a deep dive as to sort of know a world that's a little bit foreign to sort of some people, even though like they've got the perfect audience, you know, with the right level of imagination to sort of expand on the universe and expand on sort of a whole different world.
It seems to be working, right? Like these movies are making money and they're getting good reviews, and people are generally excited about that. And like for me, having a story focus, it feels a little bit unsatisfying, but at the same time, I kind of appreciate that this is a franchise that has not been bungled, and that is kind of remarkable by itself, right? Like there's no, like you can imagine a version of a Sonic movie in which he never runs, or is never fast, or he's fast in the last scene, or something like that, right? Like something that doesn't understand why people like Sonic. And It seems like if you like Sonic, they're giving you everything you want, and it's at least fine, right? Like everything else is at least fine, and I think that is actually something kind of that's kind of laudable a little bit, where they're not trying to reimagine it, they're not trying to update it really, they're just doing Sonic.
It's like the most big, and I know like some people like really like bastardize some source material that they're adapting, but to make Sonic fast is like bare minimum. It's like the first thing that you should be drawing out is how do you design him running in this world.
Yeah, but like there have been cases where it's clearly made by people who don't get the appeal of the thing. Yeah. And as much as I was underwhelmed by this movie, I couldn't help but appreciate like at least Sonic fans are getting a little bit of fan service. Yeah. Right? Like that's better than the opposite.
Yeah, for sure. Not like the Fantastic Four movie where they didn't turn into the Fantastic Four until the very end of the movie.
Yeah, and like if you like the Fantastic Four, like a gritty body horror movie is not what you're there for. And none of the versions have done Doctor Doom in a way that people like, right? So that's kind of a good example of like just don't give people what they want, or like Joker 2 similar this year, right? Where it just refused to give people what they wanted and instead did the opposite, but also didn't really find an audience that wanted that as well. Or like Borderlands, if you're into Borderlands, you didn't really get the thing that you want as well, right? Because of the way it was handled. So like grading on a curve, like this is above average just for making Sonic go fast, right? And being lighthearted and like getting the imagery right. And I imagine if you're really into this, you can see some inconsistencies or some inaccuracies, but like they seem to be really focused on getting the vibe right, and everything else kind of comes after that. And so I can appreciate kind of on that level, even if it's not for me.
No, agreed. On that note, do you want to give final thoughts?
Yeah, so final thoughts, essentially, it's not for me. Found it unsatisfying, especially the ending. I think it would have been very easy to craft an ending that kind of was built around like this whole idea of making good choices and kind of Sonic making the right choice at the right time and therefore getting through to Shadow and like all of that, right? Like, I don't think it would be difficult at all to craft a story that kind of leans into that and makes that part of the story work. And I don't think that's in conflict with the spectacle and the set pieces and the humor. I think those two only support each other rather than you having to choose between one of those two. So on that basis, I'm giving it 0.5 times the speed of light.
Okay. I guess my final thoughts on it. Yeah, like you said, not for me all the way, but I can see the appeal of it. And you know what? Not every movie needs to get the story 100% right. And I feel like it probably does just enough to kind of like justify its existence and justify sort of why people will enjoy it enough. So I think I'll be like a little bit less harsh on it in that front. Some jokes worked, some jokes didn't. It delivered my boy Shadow, and it gave him up until sort of like kind of like the final act. It sort of really delivered on sort of Shadow, which is sort of what I was looking forward to the most in this movie, anyways. So for that reason, I give it a 5 out of 10. I give it just like middle of the road. And again, not every movie needs to be perfect. Not every movie needs to be a masterpiece. Sometimes you just need these kind of like middle of the road movies, where it just does everything okay enough.
That's fair.
But yeah, it looks like we're at the end of the discussion. So thank you for working with us. And of course, let us know your thoughts down below in the comment section. What do you think of the movie? Are you actually a big Sonic fan? Did this movie sort of tick all the right boxes for you in terms of sort of delivering on the Sonic experience and the Sonic feel? And what are your thoughts about sort of what's to come with the franchise as well? Let us know in the comment section down below. And of course, if you liked our discussion, tell a friend. And if you hated what we discussed today, tell an enemy. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast. Ciao.
Bye-bye.